All right, let's get right into it. Think about the world we live in. A world of nations, with flags and anthems and borders that just feel permanent, right? But here's the thing, this world wasn't always a given. It was an idea, a really powerful dream actually, born in the chaos of the 19th century. A dream that, as we'll see, got twisted into something its creators never, ever intended.
Just look at this. This is that dream, captured in a painting from 1848 by Frederick Souriau. He pictured this incredible future of democratic and social republics, where people, not kings, define their own countries. It was this beautiful, hopeful starting point, the idea of nationalism as a force for freedom and, brotherhood.
But before this dream, Europe was just a messy patchwork of empires. It was all about absolute monarchs. You weren't a citizen, you were a subject. So the big question is, how did we get from that world of kingdoms to our world of nations? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
It really all started with a single massive explosion, an event that sent shockwaves across the entire continent. This was the revolutionary spark that would light the fire of nationalism.
So this was the old world order, absolutism. You had one king, one ruler with total, completely unchecked power. Think about it. You weren't an Austrian or a Frenchman. You were a subject of the Habsburg Empire or the Bourbon dynasty. Your entire identity was tied to a single monarch, not to a shared culture or people.
And then, 1789 happened. The French Revolution wasn't just about kicking out a king. No, it was about something much bigger. It was about transferring power, sovereignty, from that one monarch to the people themselves. It was a declaration that the people are the nation.
And what's so fascinating is how deliberate this all was. I mean, the revolutionaries didn't just cross their fingers and hope a nation would appear. They actively built one. They came up with new concepts like the fatherland and the citizen to create a collective identity. They designed symbols like the tricolor flag. They standardized laws and even language. They were literally forging a single French people out of a kingdom of subjects.
Then this guy comes along, Napoleon, and he is one complicated figure. As his armies marched across Europe, they brought the tools of a modern state with them, like the Napoleonic Code, which meant equality under the law and an efficient government that got rid of feudalism. But, and this is a huge but, he also crushed democracy, brought in censorship, and demanded crazy high taxes and forced people into his army. So he's spreading the template for a modern nation, while simultaneously stamping out the very freedom that was supposed to be the whole point. So after Napoleon is finally defeated in 1815, Europe just enters this period of intense conflict. You've got these new, exciting ideas of nationalism and liberty locked in a desperate struggle with the old powers who are desperately trying to turn back the clock.
And this really boils down to a massive battle between two big ideas. On one side, you have the liberals. These are the educated middle-class folks who want government chosen by the people, individual freedoms, and nations built on constitutions. And on the other side, the conservatives. That's the old monarchies and aristocrats, and they are terrified. They want to restore the old way of doing things and crush all these dangerous new ideas.
And you know what? They had every reason to be afraid. This whole idea of a nation of citizens was a direct threat to their power, to their entire way of life. It felt like the ground was literally crumbling right underneath their thrones. And nothing, I mean nothing, terrified them more than men like this. Listen to this. When the most powerful conservative in all of Europe, Austria's Chancellor Metternich, calls you the most dangerous enemy, you know you're seriously shaking things up.
That man was Giuseppe Mazzini, and he was really the heart and soul of this revolutionary nationalism. For him, nations were the natural way humanity was meant to be organized, almost like a divine plan. He believed unifying Italy wasn't just a political project, it was the only way to achieve true liberty. His dream of a Europe made up of free democratic republics? Yeah, that was the conservatives' absolute worst nightmare.
But this whole movement wasn't just political, it was also deeply, deeply cultural. You had philosophers like Johann Herder who argued that the true spirit of a nation, its Volksgeist, wasn't found in some fancy palace. No, you found it in the folk songs, the poems, the dances of the common people, das Volk. This cultural side of things is what really gave the movement its soul.
Okay, so let's move on, because this is where the story takes a really sharp, decisive turn. That early dream of nationalism,
It was about to be reforged, not with votes and speeches, but with iron and blood.
The year 1848 was a huge turning point. Those liberal revolutions that swept across Europe, the very ones Soryu dreamed about, they all failed. So the old conservative powers had this light bulb moment, a really cynical one. They basically thought, hey, if we can't beat this nationalism thing, why don't we hijack it? And that's what they did. They started using nationalist feelings to build up their own state power and expand their armies.
And the absolute master of this new game was Prussia's Otto von Bismarck. This guy was no liberal dreamer. He was a cold, hard realist. He knew a unified Germany would make Prussia incredibly powerful. And as you can see, he didn't do it with speeches. He did it through a calculated series of 3 wars, step by step, building a new, powerful empire.
And this wasn't just a German thing. You can see here, the Unification of Italy followed a very similar path, a mix of war and shrewd political moves. In a weird way, Mazzini's liberal dream was actually happening, but it was being done by kings and prime ministers, not by the people. The map of Europe was being redrawn by force.
And that brings us to the final and pretty tragic chapter of this story. That beautiful dream of a family of nations, one so full of hope, was about to spiral into a nightmare of jealousy and brutal conflict.
By the end of the century, that optimistic, liberal nationalism of 1848 was just gone. And in its place was something much, much uglier. An aggressive, intolerant belief that my nation is better than your nation. It stopped being a reason for freedom and became a reason to go to war.
And ground zero for this new, dangerous nationalism was the Balkans. As the old Ottoman Empire got weaker, all these new nations, Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, popped up. But instead of working together, there was this intense jealousy. Every new nation wanted to expand its borders at the expense of its neighbors. It created an incredibly explosive situation, a real powder keg.
And what made everything so much worse was that the great empires of Europe, Russia, Germany, Austria-Hungary, they all saw the Balkans as a giant chessboard for their own ambitions. They just poured fuel on the fire, backing different sides, playing these small nations against each other to expand their own power. And this rivalry led to war after war, setting the stage for the total catastrophe of 1914.
And this is where it all ends up. Nationalism completely merges with imperialism. The goal wasn't just to have your own nation anymore. The goal was to prove your nation was superior by dominating other people. This map says it all, really. National pride is based on ruling the world, on having an empire. The dream of a brotherhood of nations was completely dead.
So, we come full circle. There's no doubt nationalism gave millions of people a sense of belonging, a common identity they never had before. It literally built the modern world we live in. But as this whole story shows, that unity, well, it often came at a terrible, terrible price. And that's a tension, a question we are all still grappling with today.